So, beginning with lesson 1 in the kindergarten program, the kindergarten program is a lot of fun, and your book is basically your program. And so I would show the children the book right off the bat. Now, one of the things I've found right away is that you can learn how to read upside down, but the best thing to do is to be sure that there is an easel or a chalkboard or a whiteboard somewhere nearby where you can stand the book and read it at this level and point to the things in your story as you go through the stories. And then the children can see it better as well, and they can all be engaged in it rather than having to turn the book from here to here. So try to be sure that the classroom has a spot where you can set this up. Most kindergartens seem to have an easel, and that works really well. So what we talk about in the first activity is about Robbie and his brother who live in the city and who go to visit their aunt and uncle, they're from Boston, and who live in the country on a farm. And so Martin is his brother, but we don't hear Martin's name too often. It's kind of fun to see if the children remember his name. But then there's a picture of a city. And I would say to them, does this look like where you live? And mostly it does. Maybe you're teaching in a rural area and it would be different. But again, I'd like to, each time as I'm reading the story, I will stop and say, I'll point out something that I want them to try and recognize and connect with what they already know. So here's their city and where they live, and their parents are saying goodbye, and here they are going off to the farm, and they're thinking about the fun things they're going to be doing. One of the things Robbie's going to do is to get to feed the chickens with his aunt and collect the eggs from his aunt's chicken coop. So they learn the word coop. And feeding the chickens, it says that he feeds them corn kernels. Now, kindergarten children may not know what a corn kernel is, but I would say to them, did you ever make popcorn? Well, before it pops, is it soft or is it hard? And usually they can tell me it's hard and it's dry, so I'll say, that's corn kernels. And I'll say, did you ever eat corn like this? And they can recognize it. They may not know what it's called, but we'll talk about a corn on the cob versus corn that comes in a can. And the corn kernels that the chickens eat are those popcorns before they pop, those kernels. The next week, very often the children can tell me corn kernels when they're looking at the next story, but they remember corn kernels after you've talked about it. And then Robbie gets to choose, to go and collect the eggs from the coop. Now, I would say to them, what are chicken eggs like? Can you throw them at somebody and have them catch it? And they'll say, no. And I'll say, how come? Because it'll make a mess. And so we remember, and we talk about that it's a fragile shell. So Robbie's got a little basket there, and he puts a towel in the basket. And I'll say, why do you think he did that? After we've talked about the fragile shell, they'll get the idea that, that was a nice thing to do, that it protects the eggs so they don't break and they don't make a big mess. Then we talk about Robbie and his aunt and uncle and his brother. We talk about collecting the eggs and going to trade with Mr. Lee in his store. We talk about trading, and we talk about, what does that mean? Do you need money to trade something? If you have a pen that I really like, and I have a book that you would love to have, I can say, I'll give you my pen if you give me my book. And we trade it. Do we need money? No, we don't. So that's called trading. And that's what they did. So they brought eggs to Mr. Lee, and he gave them flour. And then they brought flour and eggs to Miss Jean. And she gives them her delicious, yummy bread that she just baked with flour and eggs that they brought. So they have not had to use any money all day today, but they've given something to someone else, and they got something that they needed in return. Then they go home, they have all these yummy things, they go fishing. Except Robbie doesn't like squiggly worms, which you have to put on your fishing pole. So he gets to pick berries with his uncle, and his brother goes fishing with his aunt. And that night they have a wonderful day. He talks to his parents, and he sleeps peacefully because they are so proud of him for all the good things he did. So as you go through each story, find opportunities to stop and say, does anyone know what this is? What does that mean? And try to relate it to something you feel that they would know at this point. And so I think those opportunities will present themselves pretty quickly each time. They also get something to do, an activity, and in this case they'll draw their favorite animal in the middle. Now you might want to just kind of remind them that the animals that might be their favorites are not necessarily a farm animal that we just read about, not necessarily these animals. It can be any animal they can think of that they've ever heard of. So they should draw a decent picture of an animal, and if they have time, they can color in the other ones. And if they're able, they can write the name of the animal.